Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome back to On the Fringe. This is Dave, and I'm here with Gavin,
Hey,
and we're coming back to a wild story that we've been covering since the very beginning of our show. And this is playing out very much like a true crime novel, isn't it, Gavin? Maybe something you'd see on Lifetime, hopefully better than that, but you kind of get where I'm going with this. This is
hopefully.
something that's just, it's a story for the ages.
It is. It's the story of one lady of mixed fortune, I guess, erstwhile known as Alice Guo, who just recently was sentenced to life, I think it was life in prison
Yeah.
in the Philippines, for human trafficking. And when we started with Alice, that was not on the table at all. She had been arrested. I think initially there was a arrest for a suspicion of not being Filipino or having obtained citizenship illegally, which has now been found to be the case. But this is a very winding, interesting story that is going to sort of echo down the years, I have a feeling. When did she become mayor again, Dave? Was that 21 or 22?
I think it was 2022.
So in 2022, she became the mayor of a town called Bamban in northern Luzon in the Philippines. And there were there were issues because she seemingly come kind of from nowhere. She had a lot of money. No one was exactly sure where she was from, and no one was exactly sure how she got into Bamban. There were rumors that actually she was a Chinese national who'd immigrated. And I think at some point she was summoned to Manila uh, to give evidence, basically. And that was kind of a bizarre spectacle because she showed up and there was this very long, convoluted story about a Chinese father, a Filipino mother who'd run off. She'd been raised on a pig farm. She didn't know where the pig farm was. She didn't have any friends. She didn't really talk to anyone until she was like 17. Then she ran off from the pig farm and she showed up and she was so happy to be in Bamban, she decided to become mayor. I think she voted the first time she was registered as a voter was the year before she was elected mayor. So there was a lot of document gaps. There were just not a lot of people. Again, it's kind of a bizarre story. Like it was just hard to corroborate on any level.
Yeah. The whole story kind of just fell apart
Yeah.
when the Filipinos figured out that she actually was a Chinese national. And
Hmm.
she first came to the Philippines when she was 17. She was fingerprinted and she came on a Chinese passport and she came under the name of Guo Huaping. And you go back to that date, and there's clear evidence that she came to the Philippines from Fujian in China. And there's no way that she could have been born in the Philippines. There's no way that her birth registration could have happened in 2007. And this whole entire story was ridiculous and it was made up. And that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back for Alice first getting caught. But this turned into a huge, long, convoluted saga, didn't it, Gavin?
Boy, it did. So around about that time, there were two raids on a compound she was living on in Bamban, which turned up, I think it was like 800 people were working on this compound. Basically, it was a scam farm. And it had been registered as a POGO, which stands for Dave. You got to help me out here. A POGO is a
It's a
Phil,
Philippine offshore gaming organization, I believe,
I believe
is
so.
what it stands
So
for. It's an online casino.
basically, and it became apparent that whoever was running this facility had basically been using slave labor to do so. A lot of the people had been tortured. They were beaten if they didn't fulfill a quota. Standard scam farm operation, basically. And this was going on in the middle of Bamban, basically, I think where her apartment was. So it was a bit of an issue. I mean, this was also like there were a lot of questions as even before they raided the compound, there were a lot of questions as to, she had like a McLaren. I think she briefly owned a helicopter. There were just a lot of questions about where the money was coming from.
Hmm.
Well, when those raids happened, it became very apparent where the money had been coming from. And there were just so many shell corporations involved in keeping this thing running. So she got into very hot water. And what did she do, Dave?
Well, Alice flew the coop,
She
and
did.
in July or August, she was summoned back to, this was in 2024, July or August 2024. She was
Hmm.
summoned to appear in front of the Philippine Senate again, and she didn't show up. And from what we know, she got on a speedboat and she fled with her quote siblings, Sheila Guo and Wesley Guo, to Sabah, which is part of Malaysia. It's the very eastern part of Malaysia on Borneo. And they went to Sabah, then they all flew to Kuala Lumpur. And when she was in the Kuala Lumpur airport, she was using a Philippine passport. So the Philippine government had not canceled her Philippine passport. She made it to Jakarta, and her
Hmm.
siblings made it down to Batam, which is a small island south of Singapore in Indonesia, and they were all arrested in Indonesia. And Alice was arrested and she was caught by the Indonesian police. And then the Philippine, I think, Minister of Justice came down and they had a little chat. And she had a little Starbucks and they flew her back to the Philippines and they put her on trial. And within a year, I mean, she was convicted and now she's going to be in jail for life, according to the ruling.
So this is again just sort of an incredible turnaround. I mean, a couple of years ago, there was sort of hints that maybe she wasn't who she said she was. And now she's looking at life in prison for essentially human trafficking and operating a scam farm. But we were talking about this, and the sort of the interesting thing about this coverage is it tends to be very one-dimensional, and that a lot of the media coverage on this has been how could a Chinese national go to the Philippines and get elected mayor? Which, in my opinion, is actually maybe the least interesting part of the story because the answer is very simple. Like a lot of elections in a lot of parts of the world, she paid the right people and she ran a fairly good campaign. And
Yeah,
she got elected. And, people, even if you interview people today from Bamban, overwhelmingly very positive about her and her tenure as mayor because the economy was doing pretty well. So most people were relatively happy. Um,
yeah,
that's what happened there.
yeah.
But there are a lot of things that tie this into a broader story, aren't there, Dave?
Well, there are. And something too that we have to talk about is there are allegations from Xi Zhejiang, who worked for the MSS, the Ministry of State Security in China. It's kind of like the Chinese CIA, that Alice
Hmm.
Guo actually was affiliated with them as well.
It's worth noting that Xie Zhejiang, which I just butchered, but I'm trying to say the name correctly. He was operating, he's one of the main operators of Shui Cocoa in Burma and was a massive scam farm operator and is currently, I believe, about a week ago, was flown back to Beijing along with the Thai King and is now in custody. So
Yeah.
this commentary was before he was returned. And this was a guy who, I mean, is fascinating in his own right. Sort of went off the reservation and wound up for a period of time being one of the most powerful people in the Golden Triangle. But yet, this is someone who, on the surface, has no direct connection to this, stating on the record that, yeah, I knew her handler. She was there pushing the MSS agenda. It was not a money laundering operation. That was a small part of it. Pretty incendiary stuff, really. And I think that also ties into a larger frame story, which is this is also about a change in regime. In the Philippines, you had the transition from the Duterte to the Marcos administration, which has been, I would say, pretty turbulent and has
Yeah, to say the
involved,
least.
to say the least, I mean, death threats, counter death threats, threats to dig up the body of people's fathers and throw them in the ocean. I mean, really sort of an incredible saga there. And now, of course, with Rodrigo Duterte, the former Filipino president, now actually in custody at the ICC in The Hague in the Netherlands for crimes against humanity. So yeah, it's been a bit of a change. One of the things that's happened there is that there has been a shift. During the Duterte administration, the Filipino government had an almost equidistant relationship with China and America. Pretty open to Chinese economically. There was no aggressive posturing. The Philippines and the People's Republic of China have competing territorial claims in what's called the South China Sea. There was no real friction there. And Duterte was always very clear that, as far as he was concerned, the Chinese were as good as the Americans. I think quietly but decisively that has shifted dramatically under Marcos. And we're now back at a point, I say back because, again, the Philippines was an American colony, has historically had a pretty close relationship with America. It's returned to a posture of allyship with America and I would say pretty aggressive pushing back against Chinese expansionism.
Yeah, and I think
Though
too,
you could look at this and say that this is a part of that policy change as well, whereas previously what the Pogos were doing, even if it was illegal, was not really being looked into.
right. I mean, they were kind of glancing over it and going, as long as we've got money coming in, that's the important thing. We need to grow the economy. We need money coming in. And now I think Marcos is going, well, we don't want dirty money coming in because we're not going to have control over that money.
Hmm.
And I think this goes back to you have two big factions in the Philippines. You have different factions politically within all these other factions. And corruption is so endemic that if you don't have control over the money, then it's going to be hard for you to keep control of the country.
Well
So
said.
I think it comes down to having political control over the country due to having control over where the money's going.
Yeah, I think that's a very sort of accurate picture of what's going on here. They have to secure the money and they also have to, I think, make sure they're not exposed. And this
Hmm.
is part of the issue is if you have people who've embedded themselves in this political system through money laundering, through illicit electoral practices, they are going to, particularly if they are working for the MSS, they're going to collect information on everyone else involved in that system.
Hmm.
And those people will be potential assets. You're now in a position where the Philippines is in a period of, I would say, aggressive defense procurement. They're getting frigates from Japan. They're getting missiles from India. They're continuing their defense partnership with the US. They're getting more ships from the South Koreans. They are aggressively posturing against the Chinese, and they cannot risk. the kind of disruption a motivated and entrenched Chinese intelligence officer would be able to do. And I think, along with everything else that's going on, they're making an example of her.
Hmm.
You can't get away with this anymore. Because, and we were talking about this. This is not just happening. First of all, China is not the only country that does this. Second of all, this is not just happening with certain governments in certain parts of the world. This kind of organized crime figure comes in, throws money around, builds a compound, starts making money, takes over the municipal government. You can find that in pretty much every region on the planet, whether it's in Central America, whether it's in Eastern Europe, whether it's in South Asia, whether it's in Southeast Asia. This is a pretty universal tale. I think it's unusual in that it sits at the crossroads of so many larger world events.
Yeah, everything ties back into the scam farms. And they
Yep.
tie into it because these generate so much money. And you can move the money so many different places. And you can use these countries' positions. They have SEZs set up to come in
Mm.
and set up a business and basically do whatever you want. And you can hire people to come in and work in these countries for virtually nothing, and you can collect all the profits because the margins are so high if you're not paying anybody anything and you're getting subsidies from the local government and you're getting money from outside the country that's worth a lot more in that country. It's a win, tremendous win for a business. And if your organized crime is
Yeah.
just going to entrench you into that country and into that community where you're going to be almost too big for them to push you out because you can control everything.
Yeah. And I think we were looking at I mean, again, who knows? There are probably other examples of it going on. But I think we were looking at it maybe in the embryonic stage with
Hmm.
Alice.
Yeah. Yeah. This is definitely not, I would say, full metamorphosis, but
No.
in 5 or 10 years, you may see what's actually happening. And I think if you want to get an idea of that, look at the Golden Triangle, Myanmar, Laos, and Cambodia.
Yeah, and we'll definitely get back to that on the Fringe sometime soon. Anyways, thanks for listening about the rather twisted tale of Alice Guo, and we'll be covering this in more depth next season.
We will. And thank you guys, as always, for listening. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share. Spread the message out there. If you know somebody that is reading about Alice Guo and they want to hear more, this touches on a lot more facts and a lot more information that you're not going to see from regular news sources. So
Hmm.
pass the word on. We will keep doing our best to inform you on going ons that need more light. And with that, thank you guys very much for listening. This is Dave,
And Gavin, and
and we're off.
we're
We're what?
we're on the Fringe.
We are on the fringe, and now we're off. I can't find the button.
Hit the button.
Where's the button?
Hit the button.
No, I hit the wrong button. Shit. Hit the video button.
Hit the button, Dave.
There we go. Hit the button.